I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. I wish my son were here. Those speeches were fabulous. They touched me, choked me up. I want all the Jesuit students, I want you to join me right now. Look at your fathers. Tell them thank you. Dad, thank you. They sacrificed so much for you, each one of them, to send you to Jesuit, because they care about you. They care about who you become. I know as a father, I have a son who's a freshman in high school right now. I wish you were at Jesuit, I really do. We live out in Phoenix right now, and as a dad, you want the best for your kids. You want to do everything you can for them to help them become the man that you hope they be. And Jesuit does such a great job of facilitating that and helping dads along the way. You know, my dad was a teacher and a coach, and he had 5 boys that he sent to Jesuit, that he sacrificed financially to send us to Jesuit, because he cared about us, because he cared about who we became as men. You know, and I think about what it means to be a success. You know, and I don't think it has anything to do with money or fame or fortune. It has to do with who you become as a father, who you become as a husband, who you become as a person in the community, and how you treat people. You know, I look at my brother Ryan, who's sitting there, and my other brothers, John and Tyler and Nick, who went to Jesuit, and I'm proud of the men that we became. I'm proud of the fathers that we are to our kids and the way that we treat people in our communities. I think you can be defined by the way that you treat people who can do nothing for you. You know, I know when I was in the NFL locker rooms, I'd look around and I could tell a lot by how guys in that locker room treated the equipment managers. You know, how they treated the guys that were cleaning up after them. You know, the guys that couldn't do anything to help them, what they were going to do in their careers, couldn't help them financially. How did they treat them? That said a lot to me. And I learned those lessons at Jesuit. I had a brother who was older than me, who had allergic reaction when he was young to DPT shots. He was left the equivalent of a 6-month-old for his whole life. Couldn't really talk, couldn't really control his muscles, couldn't walk, but he was a fighter. You know, and when doctors said and told my dad and my mom that he wouldn't live more than a year, you know, they brought him home and they loved him. And he lived for 26 years. And what Michael taught us was that life is more than what you do. You know, you can have an impact on people just by surviving, just by fighting. And Michael had a big impact on us. When I got to Jesuit, it was natural for me to want to get involved in helping people like my brother and doing Special Olympics and getting involved in Challenger Baseball. Ryan did Challenger Baseball. We all did muscular dystrophy camp, every one of us. In fact, my dad even went as a counselor one year. Almost got kicked out, I think. No, you know, we had a lot of fun at muscular dystrophy camp. Bob Weiner was a great friend of mine, ended up becoming my best man at my wedding. He was a young coach and teacher at Jesuit and took so many students and players of his to muscular dystrophy camp. I went my first time when I was a freshman, after my freshman year at Jesuit. I think you have to be 16 now, but I was 14 then and went there. I think I just turned 15. And I'll remember the first time they were messing around with me because I was the youngest counselor there, and they didn't tell me that my camper had Tourette's syndrome, as well as muscular dystrophy. So we got to the first dinner, and he was late getting there, and I was waiting for him, and I brought him in, and we sat down for the first dinner, and he just started cussing, like out loud for everybody to hear, and everybody's looking at me, and I can't control my camper at all, and I think that I'm the worst in the world, and then they all started laughing, and Bob was roaring and laughing, and you know, it was a good way to break the ice for me. What was great about muscular dystrophy camp, and if you haven't gone, I encourage you to go. Because for me, and I went 7 years, and Ryan went, I don't know, how many years did you go? 3 or 4 years, 6 years, 7 years? Yeah, he went in college as well. I went a few times in college and after college, and I know John did as well. And what was great about muscular dystrophy camp is you were serving somebody else, and you had to do everything for them, you know, depending on the severity of the disease. But you saw joy. You saw kids who were encumbered by this disease throughout their life be happy for a week, and they were free from this disease for a week. And it stirred something in me that I didn't really know existed. You know, something where you're committing greater than yourself. And to be great at anything in your life, truly accomplish something great, you have to be committed to something greater and bigger than yourself. And that's, for all you students, that's what you're striving for. That's really what your faith is all about. You know, when we talk about being men for others, it's finding something that's bigger than yourself. Finding a calling that's more important than who you are and what you want to accomplish for your life. It's finding something bigger to strive for, to fight through, that whatever gets in your way, you're able to continue to strive because you're calling. And that's really what muscular dystrophy stirred in me, was that I could have an impact on somebody, even with little effort. Because going for a week in the summer to you is not a big deal. You give up a week and you go and you think, all right, I'll have some fun. And yet for those kids, that's the week they live for all year. That's the 1 week that they're free from all the inhibitions that the disease places on them. And that stirred something in me. And that's why I kept going back. And that's why I was involved, even when I got to Michigan. When I left Florida, I went up to Michigan. You know, I didn't know anybody at Michigan at all. And I was going up there to play football. That was really what my focus was on. I wanted to get an education, but I was going there to play football. The second day of football camp in the fall, I tore my quad of my kicking leg. And I was done for that year. I couldn't kick anymore. And I struggled. I struggled to fill that void because sports was really my support system. And my faith really hadn't grown yet. I had a faith, and I loved God, and I knew who God was, obviously, going through Jesuit, but I didn't really live for God. You know, that wasn't paramount to me. When I hurt my leg and I couldn't kick for 5 months, and I didn't know if I'd ever kick again, and sports was taken away from me, I struggled to fill that void. And one of the things I did was, I did two things. One, I turned to God, and two, I turned to serving other people. I started to get involved when I was up there with Mott Children's Hospital. It's one of the greatest hospitals in the country. They deal with a lot of heart diseases for young kids. And Michigan had a great program where athletes could go on Thursdays if they chose to visit the patients at Mott Children's Hospital. And so I started to go on Thursday nights. And it was so natural for me because of what Jesuit created, because of the community service requirement and getting involved in so many projects and seeing the impact that not only it had on other people, but that it had on me personally and what it did to my heart and what it stirred in my heart. And so it was natural for me to want to go and get involved with Mott Children's Hospital and to start going and talking to those kids and kind of seeing the same joy on their face. And just because I was a football player at Michigan, they were excited to meet me. And for that moment, they forgot about whatever disease it was that they were dealing with. And when they were staring death in the face, you know, because so many of those kids had a death sentence when they were there, they were happy for that moment. You know, and that's what's special about serving other people. It's not about you. It's about what you can do for them and the impact that you have on them. But the crazy thing is that it has such a huge impact on you and who you become and the way that you treat other people. When I was at Michigan one time, you know, there was a lot of homeless people in Ann Arbor, and they were always asking for money. And, you know, you kind of, as you're on your own, you got to decide how are you going to respond when somebody comes up to you and they ask you for money. And I made a decision early on that I wasn't going to give money to anybody, but if somebody needed food and I had some money as I was walking around, that I was going to offer them food or I was going to get them a drink. And so many times I would, you know, somebody would come up and ask me for money. I said, no, but if you need some food, I'll go get you some food. Sometimes they would say, no, I'm not hungry. Sometimes they'd take me up on it. And I'd sit down, and many times I'd sit for 10, 20 minutes and get them something to eat and have conversations with men that I would never have got an opportunity to sit and have conversations. And some of the guys I made friendships with. One of the guys in particular, I met this guy, and he was in his early 30s, and he asked me for money, and I kind of went through my whole spiel, and he said, no, I just ate, I'm not hungry, and you know, I really don't need anything to drink, I really just need some money. And I said, well, no, I can't do that. And I left, and I kind of walked away, and I got around the corner, and I went back around the corner, I yelled for him to come back, and he walked back over to me, and I said, you know, I don't ever do this, and I don't know why I'm doing it, but I just feel God tugging at my heart. And I just got my scholarship check, and I took out whatever cash I had in my wallet, which wasn't a lot. I was a college student. It was a couple $100. And, you know, I said, listen, use this money for good. I pray that you don't go and he had told me that he was an alcoholic, and I pray that you don't go and buy alcohol with this. But, you know, God was tugging at me, and I want you to have the money that I have right now. And I didn't think anything of it, to be honest with you, and I gave him the money. And he went his way, and I went mine. About a year and a half later, I was working out at our facility at Michigan, and one of my teammates came up, and they did a lot of things where you could go and speak in classrooms. And the guy had told me that he had lost his job as a teacher because he was alcoholic. He had gotten divorced because his wife left him because he was an alcoholic. And so one of my teammates had gone and spoke at this elementary school, and he said a teacher pulled him aside afterwards. And he said, hey, is Jay Feely still there playing for Michigan? He said, yeah. He said, I want you to tell him that, Mr. Jones said hi, and that I'm doing well. And he'll remember me from that day that we met outside the post office. And the guy that was my teammate came back, and he told me that story, and I was blown away. Blown away. Because you don't know how God's going to use you. You don't know who's in desperate need. You don't know what friend needs you to reach out at school and just hear him and listen to him. You don't know who needs you to stand up for them in that moment, and how that could have a huge impact on who they become, right? And what action you take and how it could change the course of somebody else's life. I didn't do anything special. I listened to God. I listened to the tug on my heart. I certainly didn't change his life by giving him a couple $100. But that action through God had an impact on his life. That's really what it means to be a man for others. It means listening to God's calling in your life. Listen to the tug on your heart. And when you feel that tug, do it. Don't worry about what might happen, or if you fail, or if you're going to look stupid, or if it's going to accomplish something, or if somebody's going to use it for the wrong reasons. Let God take care of those details. Just listen to the tug. Try to be a man for others. Try to figure out how you can have an impact on people. When we were playing in 1997 for the national championship, we had gone undefeated at Michigan. It was awesome. It was a fun ride. I met my wife that year. It was a really cool year for me. We beat Ohio State. My dad was up there at that game to clinch an undefeated season. He came down on the field afterwards. We were celebrating this great win. So we go out to Pasadena, and we're going to play Washington State for the national championship game. They had a kickoff for kids luncheon about 4 days before the game. And they asked 5 guys from each team to come up and talk. And they said, you get a minute to talk, and you can talk about whatever you want. So a lot of guys got up. Some guys talked about not doing drugs. Some guys talked about staying in school. A lot of great messages, very short. I talked about what was near and dear to my heart. I talked about my brother Michael, and I talked about my faith, and how God has a purpose and a plan for each of our lives. And I didn't think anything of it. It was a minute long. We went, we played the game, won the national championship. It was awesome. Went back to our hotel, and it was bedlam. There was thousands of people everywhere. It was the first football national championship in 50 years at Michigan, so there was crazy celebrations going on. And I was kind of wading through all the people, trying to find my dad and my future wife and my family that were out there. And this lady came up to me, and she said, "Are you Jay Feely?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, you don't know me, and you don't know my son, but my son's 10 years old, and he has an inoperable brain tumor, and the doctors have given him less than a month to live. And he heard you talk about your brother, and he wanted to meet you." So amidst all the hoopla of a football game, I got to sit down with this young man and talk about life and the fact that he was going to die, and that he knew he was going to die. And I got to talk about my brother and his journey. My brother was still alive at that time. And when I got done, I knew that he knew 2 things. I knew that the young man knew that God loved him, and that God had a purpose and a plan for his life. And I thought that night at dinner about my brother Michael, who was still alive, laying in a bed, thousands of miles away in Florida, how here he was having an impact on somebody else's life just by surviving. And how God can use even somebody who can't talk, who can't control his muscles, who can't get out of a bed, who he can use somebody like that to have an impact on somebody else's life. My cousin became a doctor, is one of the top doctors at Rochester Mayo Clinic because of what happened to Michael. My uncle, my dad's brother, became a pediatrician because of what happened to Michael. My brothers and I obviously all got involved in Special Olympics and muscular dystrophy and Challenger baseball because of what happened to Michael. So I thought about that night. And it really, winning the national championship meant so little compared to that thought. Realizing and knowing how God can use each of us if we make ourselves available. Because really, that's the only question you have. Are you going to make yourself available? Are you going to make yourselves there for God to be able to use? Are you going to listen to that touch on your heart when it's there? Because you have a choice. You can listen to it, or you can say no, and you can turn away, and you can not seek it. And for me, that night really crystallized my faith, because I knew that God had a purpose and a plan for each of our lives if we'll seek it and we'll look after it. And if he can use somebody like my brother Michael, who can't talk, who's in a bed, imagine how much he can use all of us if we make ourselves available. And that really cemented in me the desire, wherever I went, whatever I did, I was going to use that platform and use the opportunities I have, use the finances I had to try to have an impact on people. And really, that's been the calling that I've had ever since I was at Jesuit. And that's what being a man for others is all about. Utilizing your platform, utilizing your finances, caring enough about other people that you want to have an impact on their life, and listening to God's calling on your life. Now, to do that, I think you have to not fear failure. And I want to talk to you about that a little bit. Because I think for me, that's been the key to my career, both in football and now as a broadcaster. Because I was never the best kicker. I'm certainly not the best broadcaster. And I've failed as much as anybody can fail. But one thing I didn't do is I didn't fear failure, and I didn't allow failure to defeat me. When I was with the Giants, Father was kind of talking about that. I had the best year of my career. Was leading the league in every category. And we were playing at Seattle towards the end of the year for home field advantage. We went out there, had a couple kicks in the game, and then I had a game winner at the end of the game, 41-yarder. Missed that kick. Thought I hit it great. Missed that kick. We go to overtime. And I have another game winner overtime, a 54-yarder. I missed that kick. And we get another kick, a 48-yarder. And it's probably the only kick I ever missed in my career that I missed because I was nervous that I was going to miss it. I was hoping that I would make it rather than knowing I was going to make it. And anytime you're in a pressure situation, if you're hoping that you're going to do something, you've already lost. You have to know and believe in your heart that you're going to succeed. And at that point, I was hoping, because I'd failed twice, missed 2 game winners, and I desperately didn't want to miss the third. Well, I missed the third kick, and they go down, they kick a field goal, and they win it. And now I know that my career is hanging in the balance. And I'm sitting there in the locker room afterwards, heartbroken that I didn't come through for my team, knowing that I let this great opportunity go by, knowing that I was going to have to go out in a room and face 50 media members that were going to crush me for failing so bad. And I had a choice right then how to handle it. And I went out there and I stood up there at a podium like this, and I just faced the music. Could have ran away, got dressed quick, and gone into the bus, which a lot of guys do. It's fun to go up there and talk when you make the game winner. It's not fun when you miss the game winner, especially when you miss 3 of them. But I went out there and I faced the music. I'll never forget my grandfather, who's in the Hall of Fame for both playing and coaching in basketball. He told me he's never been more proud of me than that moment when he watched me in front of the microphone facing the media and just being accountable for my actions. Because when we fail, we have to learn to be accountable. And I think that's one of our biggest failures in our country, is that we don't share our scars. We're not willing to talk about our failures. Whenever I talk, I tell a couple stories about my failures because I want people to learn from them. Because if we fear failure, we'll never accomplish greatness. If you're afraid to fail, you're not going to realize your potential. It's always going to limit you. You're going to get to the cusp of greatness, and you're going to pull back because you're afraid what might happen if you fail. Well, guess what? I want you guys all to listen to me right now. You're going to fail. I hate to break it to you. It's going to happen. You're going to fail a test. You're going to fail as a husband. You're going to fail in a business venture. It's going to happen. That's part of life. And guess what? It's great. It really is. You know why? It makes you stronger. You learn. You become better. So from that game, I go out the next week, and we're playing at Philadelphia. And I know I have to have a good game, otherwise I'm going to get cut. And I'm probably going to lose my job, and I'm probably not going to have a career in the NFL anymore. And so then I'd have to sell my house, and there's all these ramifications, if I have this bad game. Well, you can't let yourself think about that in that moment. You can't let your mind wander. And so I'm trying to be as focused as I can be and prepare myself the right way. And it's Saturday night. I'm trying to go to bed. And I get about 50 text messages on my phone, and they're like, dude, they're killing you on Saturday Night Live right now. And it was the Jay Feely story, The Long Ride Home. That was the name of the skit. And Dane Cook was playing me, and what it was like to fly from Seattle back to New York, and it was like the whole plane ride back. And I had no idea they were going to do it. And my wife thought it was funny, and I didn't think it was funny at the moment. It's kind of cool now. It's like a badge of honor now that you had a Saturday Night Live skit, but when you're the butt of all these jokes, it's not really funny at that moment. And it certainly didn't help me go out and make kicks the next game against Philadelphia. So we go out there, and of course we go to overtime again. And of course I have a game winner to win it again. And they call a timeout to ice me. And the city of brotherly love there in Philadelphia, they play a montage of all my misses from the game before on the Jumbotron. So I'm trying not to look at it. I got my head down. I'm saying a prayer. I'm like, God, give me peace. Paul talks about the peace that transcends all understanding in Philippians. And, I'm looking for that peace right then. And, thank God I was able to go and make the kick, and we win the game, and I get to celebrate. And it was such a relief. Here's the interesting thing. From that moment forward, I was a much better kicker for the rest of my career than I was before that. I was a below average kicker that just was good enough to keep his job. After that, I was above average kicker, one of the better kickers. It wasn't because I got any better physically. If anything, you get worse as you get older. All of us dads know that. But what happened was I lost some of that fear of failure. Because I had failed as bad as I could fail on a national stage. Saturday Night Live had done a spoof about me. Everybody had their laughs about me, and it didn't break me. And when you go through those moments and you failed and they don't break you, you lose some of that fear of failure. And after that, I went out there and I was able to have fun. I was able to enjoy my career. I remember stopping one time on a kickoff, and we had a bunch of young rookies, and there was this unbelievable sunset going on above the stadium, and we're about to kick off. I'm like, look at that sunset. Look how gorgeous that is. And I was like, don't forget to take in these moments, because those will be some of the moments that you remember. High school is the same way. You got to soak it up and take it in. You know, when you have an opportunity to thank somebody like you have tonight with your dad, take advantage of it. Thank them. Because you never know when you're going to get that opportunity again. You don't know if you're going to lose it. Take advantage of every opportunity. Try to have an impact on people's lives. You know, when I got cut my last year, and my football career was looking like it was over. I got cut in Arizona, and I didn't know what I was going to do quite yet. I had done a little bit of TV, and CBS called me up, and they said, you know, hey, we're interested in having you be an analyst. I had never been an analyst. I had never studied to be an analyst. I didn't know exactly what it meant to be an analyst, what that job entailed. But I was like, all right. And they said, well, we want you to try to do that. We got a job for you on a college game. See if you can do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. You know, I thought they would give you all this guidance. I thought they would take you aside. They'd give you some training. They'd teach you what it meant. They'd have somebody who'd step alongside you and mentor you, teach you how to prepare for the games. It was basically like, hey, the game's at 3 o'clock on Saturday. You know, show up on Friday, meet your crew, and do the game. So I'm about to go live on air for 3 hours, and I'm thinking to myself 2 minutes before I go, like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do right now. And I didn't know what success or failure looked like. You know, because it's not like kicking a field goal where you kick it and it's through the uprights. All right, it's good, I made the kick. You don't know if you're good or if you're absolutely awful. But I figured, you know what? If I'm terrible, so what? I'll be just exactly where I am right now. So what's to fear? You know, so I went out there, I did the game. It was actually BYU, Tennessee, so I had a whole bunch of Samoan names. I was like, thanks a lot, my first game. It was brutal trying to pronounce all these names. And so I did the game. I didn't know if I was good or not. They called me up afterwards. They say, hey, we want to offer you a job next year if you're done kicking. And the only other kicker who's ever been an analyst is Pat Summerall, you know, who started as an analyst. And then, you know, I see all the dads nod, and they remember him. You guys don't even know who Pat Summerall is, but he started as an analyst, then he became a play-by-play guy. So no other kicker's ever become an analyst before. And obviously it was an uphill road, because people look at kickers and they say, well, you're not really a football player, and what do you know about the game, and do you know offense? You're not a quarterback. Do you know defense? Can you differentiate between, you know, all the different techniques? And so I knew I had an uphill battle, but I wasn't afraid to fail, and I was going to go for it and have fun with it and enjoy the process. And this was my third year doing it this year, and it's been a fun ride. It's been a crazy ride. You know, when I finished up my first year, I did college football that whole first year. And I was done in the end of November. And I remember I sat around for like a week, and I was like, I have nothing to do now. So I called my boss up, and they had about 3 weeks left in the NFL season. I said, hey, have you scheduled everybody for the sideline the rest of the NFL season? He's like, no, we haven't done the last 2 weeks. I said, well, I think I want to do sideline. I think I could do a good job at that. And he spent an hour telling me how different being an analyst was from the sideline role and all these negatives. And you know, at the end of the conversation, I said, yeah, I'm not scared. I can do that. And so he said, let me think about it. I'll call you back. He called me back about an hour later. And he said, all right, you're signed up. 2 weeks from now, you have the San Francisco-Cincinnati game. And I went to that game, called a couple of sideline people beforehand, kind of talked to them about how they prepared and how they did their job, and went to that game, and it went well, and they had a couple of crazy special teams plays, and they threw it down to me, and I kind of analyzed them right there on the sideline and finished the game. And they called me Monday. They said, hey, we like what you did. We think we want to start that role in the playoffs. We're going to have you be the special teams analyst role. So they threw me on in the playoffs. And I did a couple games, and they said, all right, we're going to use you in the AFC Championship. I said, okay, cool. And then they called me back and said, hey, we're going to use you in the Super Bowl. So here I was, my first year doing it, I'm doing the Super Bowl. I'm like, this is crazy. But I tell you that because you have to not be willing to fail. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You know, and if I was scared of failing, if I was scared of looking bad, I might have pulled back. I might not have risked looking terrible and risked looking awful in public and having everybody say how bad you did and getting fired. But that led to great things. And I failed. I had opportunities where I didn't do a great job. I mean, this year I became, I was on dead spin and everything. I called a field goal that was wide right. I was watching it through the glass. It looked like it went right through. And I said, off the crossbar and it's good. And on the screen it showed it was going wide right. You know, and we go to break and they're like, Jay, what are you talking about? Like the kick was no good. I said, show me on the screen. And I watched it on the screen. I'm like, oh, my word, what did I just do? So we came back. I had to say, you know, I'm sorry, the field goal was no good, you know. And sometimes you have to eat it. You know, you got to eat crow and you move on. And I knew right when I made that mistake that I was going to be the butt of all internet jokes. And I think they had a thing that came out this year, 10 worst calls on sports, and I think I was number 1. You know, but that stuff happens. That stuff happens, you know. They called me up 2 weeks ago and they said, right before the Final Four, they said, hey, would you be interested in announcing the Final Four? Because Michigan was in it. I said, yeah, I'll do it. But I've never done basketball. I didn't even play basketball. and I thought I'd be the sideline. They sent me an email the next morning. They said, you know, you're going to be the analyst. And I was like, all right, I better start studying. Richard said he was confused. He was watching me. He's like, I didn't know he knew anything about basketball. I didn't. You know, but you go and you study and you get ready for it and you go out and you do it and you have fun with it. That's part of life. You know, it's not fear and failure. And I think that's the greatest lesson I learned from sports was to not fear failure because it's going to happen and it's going to make you stronger and it's going to make you better. And if you get to that cusp and you're afraid of failure, you'll pull back. So don't be afraid. Go out and have an impact on people. Find out how you can change somebody's life. You never know when that opportunity is going to be there, where a kind word or a kind gesture, helping hand, is going to change the whole path and direction of somebody's life. It could be a classmate. It could be somebody older than you. It could be your father. You know, it could be your son. You never know. You know, my brother, he lived for 26 years, laid in a bed his whole life, had an impact on people. Each one of us has the opportunity. Our legs work, our mouths work, our minds work. We can go out and we can engage and we can change people's lives. Don't forget that. Don't forget what it means to be a man for others. Thank you.